Desert landscapes extending as far as the eye can see. Vast meadows bathed in blinding light and impassable mountains. Patagonia is one of the last wild territories on the planet. A Wild West where everything still seems possible. Located in the southernmost region of Latin America, this land at the land's end is a natural empire for adventurers, riders, or travelers in search of adventure. From the Neuquén River in northern Patagonia to the foothills of the Andes, wine growers are pushing the boundaries of the desert and using new techniques to adapt to the extreme weather conditions of this isolated region. "40 years ago, Guillermo Barzi inherited a large vineyard planted by his ancestors not far from the Neuquén River, the Botega Canale. At the time, the young man arrived from Buenos Aires and literally fell in love with the region.
Patagonia, for me, means immensity, loneliness. It also means being in a place where I can have 1,000 miles spreading out in front of me. And yet there are only 3 million inhabitants. That's all. You can travel down a road for 150 miles without meeting anyone. That's amazing. It's wonderful. It's purity itself. This is one of the southernmost regions of the world for winemaking. It is the southernmost region of Argentina where wine is produced. And if you take this road for 2 miles, just after the desert, you'll come upon a real oasis, a landscape transformed by the hand of humankind.
On this land, over 40 miles long and 3 miles wide, people have been cultivating apples, pears, and grapes for more than a century. It's the start of March, and in this area of the Southern Hemisphere, the white grape harvest has begun under the watchful eye of Botega Canale's owner. This vineyard is always harvested first because the white grapes always ripen first. Semillon is a very resistant variety, perfectly adapted to this extreme latitude. For Germain, one of Guillermo Barzi's sons, growing grapes in Patagonia requires perfect knowledge of this unique environment in order to make the most of it.
There are 3 elements that differentiate Patagonia from other parts of the country. First, we have here a thermal amplitude caused by the latitude. We're at latitude 40 degrees south. We have very cold nights and very hot days in a very dry climate. The second element is the wind. It's a very important climatic feature of Patagonia. That's why we also protect our vineyards with poplar trees as wind barriers. You can see the trees moving. The wind is constantly blowing here. It cleans the atmosphere and generates a renewal of the air, which is very healthy for our production. Finally, the most important thing is water. Here, we're in an oasis in the middle of the desert. Our water comes from the Andes mountain range. It's a natural water from glacial thaw, the purest that exists.
Fighting soil drought was the first major challenge for the inhabitants who settled in this part of Patagonia at the end of the 19th century. Commissioned by the government and engineers, including Guillermo Barzi's great-uncle, Humberto Canale, they imagined an extensive irrigation network to redistribute water from the Neuquén River via a large 13-mile-long canal. The water is transported to the vineyards thanks to the ingenious use of gravitational force. According to the needs, it is Juan Martín one of the members of the Barzi family, who commands the opening and the closing of the channels.
There is a dam holding back the waters of the Neuquén River. It diverts them to the main canal. This canal is in the north, always at higher altitudes than us here. The main canal then flows through the valley and divides its waters into secondary, tertiary, quaternary canals, and finally municipal canals. This water then arrives at our domain, and you see here the way we irrigate.
At this early hour of the day, the wind is starting to pick up, and temperatures are already shooting up. Germain joins the property's oenologist, who must evaluate the maturity of the grape bunches. Horacio Bibiloni uses his refractometer to evaluate the sugar and alcohol content of the Pinot Noir grapes, a very old variety imported from Europe.
Hi, Horacio. How are you? How's it going?
I'm good, thanks. We're about to start harvesting.
What do you think of the grapes?
They're high quality. See this? Concerning Pinot Noir, weather conditions and soil composition in the area give this grape a slightly thicker skin, and the aromatic cells are in the skin, the coloring matter also, and a very important part of the tannins. So we're going to have a very ripe grape with a lot of character at the time of vinification, and this will give a very expressive wine. This is a unique quality created by the adaptation of Pinot Noir to Patagonia.
The harvest of the domain's treasure can finally begin. Everywhere in the chacras, the vineyard parcels, workers are going to work. With the hot weather of recent days, the Pinot Noir has arrived at a perfect maturity. For Guillermo Barzi, this year promises to be exceptional.
It's the king of grapes, very hard to find, very hard to grow, to produce as clean a product as this. It's a perfect grape, and it's thanks to the climate. It's thanks to the climate that there are no diseases, no noble rot, like botrytis.
At the same time, in the winery, the oenologist Horacio Bibiloni is about to taste the first grape juice from the harvest. This is an important step because this tasting will allow him to decide how the wine will be fermented in the coming months.
This is an emotional time for us because the work in the vineyards is coming to an end. Now the vinification begins in the cellars. This is a crucial moment because everything we do now around our wine will have consequences for the rest of the year. If we make the slightest mistake now, it'll be impossible for us to correct it later.
Today, the Barzi family produces 1.5 million bottles a year on 370 acres of vines. They are reaping the fruits of a wine adventure launched more than a century ago by an ancestor, Botega Canale. Their great-uncle was the first to plant vines in this valley.
Hi, Dad.
Hi, son. How are you? What do you have there?
Look what I found. The portrait that was missing. The portrait of Humberto.
Humberto Canale. Great. It looks just like Humberto. I knew him when I was little. My ancestors were born in Argentina at the end of the 1880s. They had incredible energy because they participated in the development of the country. At that time, Patagonia began to develop. The first stage of this development was the Desert Campaign, which took place in 1879. The national government, with its Minister of War, General Roca, organized a military campaign With 6,000 men on horseback, they advanced from the north of the country to the Rio Negro River. They proposed to the indigenous tribes to become citizens of Argentina, and for those who refused, they forced them to move to areas south of the Rio Negro.
General Roca wages a lengthy campaign against the Mapuche Indians. They massacre them or deport them to the south. The Argentinian government recovers huge territories and encourages newcomers to the country to colonize this arid region. 30 years after the conquest of the desert, Humberto Canale discovers Patagonia. While his parents are at the head of a large bakery in Buenos Aires, the young engineer travels between the capital and the north of Patagonia. He participates in the Rio Negro Valley irrigation projects, then decides to settle here to plant vineyards near the town that bears the name of General Roca. In 1909, Humberto begins a giant fruit production that he sells all over the country.
Look, 70, 80 years ago, we put wine in these cascos, as they were called. They're big 80-gallon barrels, and we sent them by train all over the country.
In Argentina, the train was an important instrument for conquering the territories. The old Patagonian Express, better known as La Trochita, is one of the last vestiges of this machine, which transported all kinds of goods, travelers, and settlers from all over Europe. If Humberto Canale led the way in viticulture in northern Patagonia, today other winemakers are the new pioneers. Sergio Rodriguez and his son Manuel are pushing the frontiers of southern vineyards further and further. Their small winemaking domain is located at the foot of the Andes Mountains, over 400 miles south of the Botega Canale domain.
I remember the first time we came here and the reasons we chose this land. I also remember all those dreams we wanted to bring to life. We started slowly, with all that represented for our change of life. It was a change for the whole family. We settled here and we started a new phase, as if we were pioneers.
Sergio and his family built the southernmost bodega in Patagonia. It is located at a latitude of 43 degrees south. Before them, no one had dared to produce wine in such low latitudes. Here, the thermal amplitudes are even more marked than in the province of Rio Negro, and the very frequent frosts represent a serious risk for the vines.
This is a very delicate moment. If you make a mistake, you can lose the entire crop for the year. You must be careful with every detail, even the smallest. Other winemakers rely heavily on us because we're precursors in this activity. So we're always a little ahead. It's the advantage of being a pioneer. Whoever takes a risk wins in the future.
The Nanti Fall estate produces 6,000 bottles a year. That's not much compared to the Barzi family's huge estate. But here, more than elsewhere, it is the great purity of the elements and the promise of a new life that have pushed Sergio to take this crazy gamble.
This is where my son Manuel and I lived during the first years. We cut the shrubs and bushes to create productive land. That's the first house we built. I knew that here we were not only going to find a land of opportunity, but also a better quality of life. By starting a new job like viticulture in such an extreme place, we had to prove to people, to our neighbors, to our friends, that we weren't crazy, that we had not lost our minds. There's one thing that I always repeat. No matter what the goal is, the most important thing is the path you take.
Ten years ago, the Rodriguez family left everything to try out the pioneer life in the great outdoors, build something with their own hands, and live from their wine production. Tonight, the family shares the traditional asado sheep roast.
Applause for the cook.
It is also an opportunity for everyone to taste their wine, but not too much for Manuel, because with the falling temperatures, he knows that the night will be short.
It's 3 in the morning. It's about 32 degrees. We'll switch on the sprinkling system to protect the plants from below freezing temperatures. We'll water the entire vineyard, which will cover the plants with a thin layer of ice. It's a sophisticated system and very effective. All we need is water. So I'm going to start the sprinklers.
Manuel installed this antifreeze system by using sprinklers. This helps protect his grapes from freezing cold temperatures. This system is indispensable if you want to cultivate vines here. At dawn, just before the first rays of the sun, the vines are still frozen. It's as if they're protected by a cocoon of ice. This technique may seem paradoxical, but it is very effective in protecting grapes.
You see there, the grapes are caught in the ice. The ice protects the vine because it isolates the plant and grape clusters from the freezing temperatures, and it keeps everything at 32 degrees. It's amazing, but it's like that. You mustn't touch anything. You have to let it be. Everything is natural. Gradually, the vines will lose the covering of ice and resume their normal appearance.
In spite of the constant climate challenges here, the miracle of the vines in this region of the world is also due to the nature of the earth. The work of paleontologists allows us to better understand the geological particularities of this land, because after being buried for millions of years, certain sedimentary layers are now visible thanks to the effects of natural erosion. On the shores of the Borealis Lake, the paleontologist George Calvo and his team have been at work for 20 years, making extraordinary discoveries. Funtalongosaurus, Patagonicus, or Megaraptor. For 20 years, scientists have come from all over the world to Patagonia to admire dinosaur fossils.
This rock has been trodden on by the dinosaurs. They lived here. If I pour water on this rock, it will become mud. It's the same mud the dinosaurs walked on. So if I pour water into this earth and put a plant in it, it will grow. In this rock here and a little further south, we grow carrots, tomatoes, all types of vegetables because this is the same land as in the Cretaceous era, about 80 million years ago. If it rained here as much as in the tropics, all this would be green. It would be a forest.
In this region, the earth is so rich in organic matter, you only need to bring water to grow grapes. This is seen in the Schroeder family's vineyards, a few miles from the excavation site. Here again, we find vines planted on an arid steppe. Ramiro Giusti, the oenologist of this recently planted vineyard, is convinced that the composition of the subsoil is favorable to the development of the vines.
We have very old soils here. They're the result of millions of years of conservation beneath a glacier. Before, there was a great vegetable activity here, which generated, through the breathing of the roots, these concretions of calcium carbon. These plants were the ones the dinosaurs fed on. They must have been particularly large plants to feed dinosaurs as huge as the fossilized remains we found here.
By irrigating these plots, the Schroeder family, pioneers of German origin, have cultivated 346 acres of vines. This new wine, El Dorado, produces one of the most popular wines, but also one of the most expensive in Patagonia. The Schroeder domain communicates a lot about their discovery of a dinosaur. When they were plowing the earth, workers pulled out a huge femur and many particularly well-preserved vertebrae. A replica of the dinosaur bones is presented in the cellar, at the very spot it was discovered.
This is the dinosaur Panamericanus schroderi. It's an animal with a long neck, and we also found some vertebrae, enough to define a new species of this animal that was 22 to 26 feet long. This animal lived on the Atlantic coast. Now all you see is a desert, but back then the sea stretched from here to 200 miles north.
And what did he eat?
He fed on leaves at the treetops, the highest parts because he had a very long neck. From what we found, he would have fallen prey to a carnivorous dinosaur because his skeleton was not complete.
Having disappeared 65 million years ago, the dinosaurs were the last witnesses to the lush landscapes. Nowadays, the wealth of the Argentinian substrata expresses itself through these vineyards. All over Patagonia, in the valleys, on the plateaus, or at the foot of the Andes, new farms are emerging. Just like on the tiny isolated domain of the Rodriguez family, where they had no other choice but to master the entire production chain, planting the vines, growing them, harvesting, bottling the wine, and marketing it. Sergio and his sons learned to do everything themselves.
We were the first vineyard here in Trevelin, and now there are 7 vineyards, 3 wineries, and 3 wine brands. We are proud to be pioneers, and to be pioneers means getting a lot of satisfaction, but also having many obstacles. Difficulties that those who come after us will not have to meet. Our greatest dream today is to keep the family together.
I think that with time, I've learned to love Patagonia and to respect it too. Today, I feel part of this region. I'm no longer a stranger. It's hard to adapt to Patagonia. It's extreme. You have to be ready to face the cold and the great heat. Every day is different, but the rewards are worth the efforts.
In less than a decade, Sergio and his sons have proven that Patagonia's natural elements can be conducive to the production of quality wines. Over the years, they have made constraints of this southern territory the strength of their vineyards.